the Tri-State Dairy Exchange webinar. The focus or theme of this webinar series throughout this year is navigating the future of dairy. And for the folks joining us, Sarah, if you can go back one slide.
Oh, hang on.
Too many.
There we go.
For the folks just joining us, welcome to our webinar. If you can see us here today, we are in our Maine Farmcast recording studio. So my colleague Colt Knight and I have a podcast for those that haven't tuned in. If you'd like to tune in, it's called the Farmcast. You can find it on all platforms. So we're doing a crossover event today for our webinar. The topic at hand is called The Science of Hay Harvest. So we are recording for the Maine Farmcast as well as for this webinar. And on the screen as well, there are our upcoming webinar topics. So join us next month where we'll be talking about dairy consumer trends and dairy checkoff in the Northeast, because June is Dairy Month. So we're celebrating all things dairy. And then in July, tune in for a topic on rumen biochemistry. And we'll be joined by Kurt C. I can't say that last name. But if you want to register for the upcoming events, be sure to scan the QR code. So without further ado, we'll get this webinar started. So thank you again for joining us. We're going to be talking about hay harvest, maximizing yield quality. And today I have Dr. Juan Romero. And I'll have you introduce yourself, Dr. Juan, because you are our guest expert today. So Juan, who are you?
Well, nice to meet all of you, and thanks for joining today. My name is Juan Romero. I am an associate professor of dairy nutrition and forage science at the University of Maine. So I work on forages since I was undergraduate. So I started first working on how to improve the quality of straw in my home country in Peru, and then I completed my master's and doctoral degrees at the University of Florida in Gainesville. So all about forages, how to improve the quality of forages post-harvest. So hay and silage for both beef and dairy. So then I did my postdoc at North Carolina State University to understand how the inoculants and other management practices affect the microbiome, bacterial and fungal microbiome of silage, of corn silage and small grain silage. And then I started working here at the University of Maine, and I decided that there was a lot of work to be done with hay and to storage of high moisture hay. So because of the climate that we have in this region, so I've been working on that all this time, and lately we have been also working with you, Glenda, on the issue of PFAS, right? So yes, that's a summary of my work.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yes, and so thank you for that introduction. And today we're here on the webinar. So if we go to the next slide, we just want to reiterate that the mission of the Tri-State team, and specifically the goal of our webinar series 2 in this team, is to advance dairy management and try to address shared industry challenges through innovation and collaboration across northern New England. And so as you mentioned, your work has been here in Maine and obviously trying to do research to help farmers make the best quality forage specific for dairy and beef and ruminants because of our constant change in weather patterns. So that obviously fits in nice with the mission of this team. In the next slide, we have all of our team members. So myself in Maine, Sarah in New Hampshire, and then Whitney and Amber are in Vermont. And so together we have educational events across the year. And so where I'm going to have each person just mention their upcoming events. If you're in the area of these 3 states, be sure to tune in. So Sarah, would you like to share your upcoming events?
Yeah, so in the next month, we have our mid-season corn evaluations coming up. We've got 3 all across the state. So we've got one in Kentucky, one on campus at UNH, and one up in Colebrook.
And then you're tuning in today. So we release a podcast episode on the Farmcast, and that's a good way to just maintain up to date with all of the events that are happening here in the state of Maine. Now I'll pass it to Amber.
On June 17th, you can join the UVM Extension grazing team and Gallagher representatives at the Red Schoolhouse in Randolph for the livestock fencing workshop to learn about fence options and selections, electric fence resistance and conductivity, as well as troubleshooting, energizer grounding systems, and post and wire options for both temporary and permanent fence. And there is a $20 registration fee, which covers the workshop and lunch. Also, you can join UVM Extension Grazing Team on June 24th for the Livestock Water Systems Workshop, same location in Randolph, Vermont. The grazing team will work with program coordinators from the Vermont Agency of Ag to learn about components and design of livestock water systems, including pressure tank needs, water tub, float and valve setups, and pump stations, as well as grant assistance available to producers. The same $20 registration fee to cover the the workshop and lunch. And on Thursday, July 24th, you can join the UVM Extension Northwest Crops and Soils program team at our research facility in Alberg for our annual field day. This year's theme is Growing for Tomorrow, and it highlights cutting edge research and practical innovations that are shaping the future of agriculture. Our team is excited to share timely updates on impactful projects that address both today's challenges and tomorrow's opportunities. The day will feature speakers, workshops, and a guided tour of Border View Farm. And you'll hear the latest findings on a diverse range of topics, including hemp, flax, strawberries, vegetables, dry beans, forages, soil health, and much more. For that day, we do have spots for exhibitors and sponsors, which you can contact Susan if you're interested in having a table. Pre-registration is required before July 21st. You can either visit the Conference and Events tab on the UVM Extension Northwest Crops and Soils website, and I will actually drop the individual registration links for all three of these into the chat.
Thanks, Amber. I have other educational events on that day, or else I'd be joining because that sounds like a lot of fun. So in the next slide, we've decided to share another educational resource for you. And May's featured podcast is the Iowa State University Extension and Outreach podcast, Dairy News and Views. If you're wanting to learn more about the research that's ongoing in Iowa, it can be also applicable to the northern New England area. So I'm always learning from the folks over at Iowa. Be sure to check out that podcast. So without further ado, the topic at hand, hay quality and improving hay quality and maximizing yield. So Sarah, I don't know if you want to just share the speakers for now, and then we can tune back to this slide. So Juan, when you're teaching your students or when you're working with farmers, which you've been doing quite a bit in the past couple of years, what do you see the biggest challenges, and how did you sort of conduct research to address those challenges specific to the conditions here in the state of Maine?
Well, we have a quite unique set of challenges in the Northeast, so especially in New England region, because of the precipitation that we have. So, for instance, in the case of hay production, we seldomly have periods across the year that we don't have rain longer than 4 days.
Yeah.
So I was surprised that there are even some years where we don't have any period where we don't have like rain-free periods that are longer than 4 days.
Right.
So, and that makes hay production hard. So we have been kind of exploring this, and there is not still like a final complete study, but so it seems that the trend is for us to have less and less of these periods that are necessary for us to produce proper hay. And then basically then that means that we need to improve our technology so we are able to do that, and we can still produce hay. So because it's a very important feed. It has many special applications. Some people, they have to feed hay. So, and also we share these issues with the Northwest, right? So, and the Eastern US in general. So also the Southeast has issues with precipitation. So, and that's quite challenging. So then basically how we tackle this issue is first, okay, let's collect all the information that was available, everything that was published. So nobody had done that for hay, amazingly. So, and thanks with some funding support from BASF and the USDA, we're able to get a publication on hay preservatives. So we're able to compile all this information, and we're able to find some interesting trends that nobody had identified before. So, for instance, that legumes could be more susceptible to spoilage compared to grasses. So that hay microbial inoculants actually do not work.
Right.
So compared to the organic acid preservatives. So and then with that information, then we start preparing a new hypothesis, and we got funding from the USDA Alfalfa program to explore these new research lines, and that's what we have been doing in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you talk about preservatives. Can we break that down? How do folks use preservatives? Kind of, we did some programming on this actually. When to use preservatives? When's sort of the optimal time? But I think it'd be really good to just have that context for folks that maybe have used them or haven't used them or are thinking about them and wanting to learn more.
Yeah, so basically, this will depend on the size of the bell. So if it's a big round bell, so those big round bells, they cannot have more than 18% moisture. So the square bell, the small square bells, like you can get by with 20% moisture, and the large rectangular bales, those are used typically for interstate transportation. Those even require to be drier, so they cannot have a moisture higher than 16%.
Right.
So, and typically in this area where we're going to have these round bales, right? So we cannot have more than 18% moisture for those. So whenever that's going to be the case, and we are testing or SWATs, and we find, okay, well, it's going to rain, it seems that we're not going to be able to reach that target, then that's when we want to think about applying preservatives. So, and the preservatives will work until basically the highest moisture level that they can take is somewhere between 25 and 30% moisture. So beyond, above that, is better to do baling,
Beverage.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yes, so within that range, basically not going between 20 above 25, 30%. So then the hay preservatives will help when applied at right doses, right? Suggested by the manufacturer.
Yeah.
So that's one way to think about it. So because weather is unpredictable, really here. So there are some studies indicate that in this region, the Northeast, we cannot predict beyond 2 to 3 days ahead of us. So
Rain's
so
coming.
then basically having some backup preservative
Yeah.
product is going to be important, right? So thanks to the funding we got from the USDA and the support that we also have from Chemin Industries, so we are able to conduct the studies. And for instance, nobody had determined before if buffered organic acids were as efficient as preserving hay as compared to plain propionic acid.
Yep.
So so far we have observed there are no differences between these two. So when you apply that alkali to the organic acid, then you make it buffered. So you are not compromising on the efficacy of the preservative. So and then you're gaining the basically your equipment having less issues with corrosive with rusting and corroding, and also that product is going to be a bit safer to handle compared to
Right.
the traditional propionic acid based products. So ammonium propionate is basically going to be a very good alternative. It's going to have the same efficacy as regular propionic acid, so without the issues of corrosiveness and hazards to the people that are handling that acid.
Right.
So
Right, because people safety when handling these preservatives, obviously, and acids is really critical. But you mentioned something. So haymaking is obviously, $1 million question and how to make it the best. But two really important things that you mentioned was obviously harvest time, but then storage. And so I think you had a visual here, if Shara wants to share it, that we have to consider moisture and then
yes, it's slide number 4.
storage.
It's after the weather related factors. So
Yeah, so once you harvest, right, it's great that you're harvesting on time, but then storage of
crucial.
of
Yes.
the hay is also crucial because you've mentioned this many times before, right? Sometimes you really can't control at the moisture level that you harvest, right? Because like right now, folks are trying to get stuff started for spring. Some people are potentially doing a first cut depending on where they are. But then we have rain for the next 5 days. And so at the end of the day, you're going to have to sort of, make as much of your forage within that time. But once you get it harvested and put up, now, you don't want to lose even more nutrients than more of the groceries that is in that forage by not storing the forage correctly. So you have this slide here for folks to kind of help us better understand this. So take it away.
Yeah, so hay is a completely different beast compared to silage. So you can have like horrible losses, dry matter losses, if hay is not stored properly. So that's a crucial thing that we need to keep in mind compared to silage. The storage is going to be if 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 sealed correctly, is going to be stable compared to hay that has high moisture, is going to can experience losses up to 30%. So if not higher, if not stored properly. So as you can see here, if you just leave the hay on the ground without any rain cover, you can see losses up to 40%, right? And this is a compilation of studies from Collins, Koblenz, and Hancock. So, and we prepared this slide from their data. So you can see that on the other extreme, so if you place your bales under a proper pole barn or hoop structure, you can reduce all the way from 40 to 5, so less than that. So during storage. So
and in this slide, so it's representing the potential storage dry matter losses of round bales. And the lighter orange is twine wrapped, and then the darker orange is net wrapped. And the percentage of dry matter losses on the x-axis, but on the y-axis, like you said, the last thing on the bottom says pole barn hoop structure, and that really decreases your dry matter losses than just being outside on a ground that's poorly drained.
The crucial step is making sure that the bales are not touching the soil, because they can absorb that moisture from the soil, and also for the rain not to contact the bales. So we need to cover it. So as long as we prevent the rain from hitting the bales and the soil moisture to get into the bottom of the bales, then we're in good shape. So yes, a net wrap seems to have a little bit more or little bit less issues regarding dry matter losses, but this is not something that has been actually like compared in this is a compilation, so in a single study.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think it'd be good if we can come back to this slide to kind of show the combination of dry matter loss for harvest, high moisture, low moisture, and then when stored. So if we can go to the first diagram, Sarah, yeah, this one here. So I think this really represents kind of what you were mentioning. So on the y-axis, we have the dry matter loss. On the x-axis, we have moisture when stored. And so I know, today's topic isn't about silage, but for folks interested, you can reference that at a later time. So let's talk about the types of hay on the right side of the graphic, where you have high moisture and dry hay or drier condition.
Yeah, it's very interesting, this transition between silage and hay, that baleage. So you can actually, Andre Brito at UNH is conducting a study within the grant that we work with the USDA, so assessing the effect of wrapping high moisture hay. So basically hay that was harvested at 70% dry matter, 75% dry matter. So because at that point it's too dry for fermentation to happen.
Right.
So, and what is actually protecting the material is the wrapping. So, and that for me highlights the importance of proper sealing. Even, like if we're talking about a silage in this in this hay topic conversation. So wrapping is super crucial for silage, right? So that is what is preventing that bale from spoiling, because there is no more fermentation, like above 60% dry matter in forage. There is no more fermentation. In high moisture corn, it can be fermentation, but for forage material, that above 60%, the fermentation stops. So in 70 is like you are not going to find any activity of the lactic acid bacteria.
Right. And why is that so critical?
So well, once that explains why microbial inoculants do not work with hay. So, and this is something that we found mathematically, statistically with our studies, but also before other hay researchers like Dr. Collins, they were already speculating this back in the 2000s. So that hay microbial inoculants didn't seem to work. And from what I just told you, right, that lactic acid bacteria, they don't like to work on forage and such high dry matter concentrations. So they're not going to thrive. And that is why microbial inoculants do not work. But the molds and the yeast, if they have air, that little moisture is going to be enough for them to spoil like half of the bale,
Right.
right? So
And you have here in the graphic too, so the storage loss, and you have your mold here. So there's kind of really that opportunity of where. So go ahead. I just wanted to indicate and kind of show that with the slide. So the greater the more moisture you have when stored, the better opportunity those microbes and molds will thrive. Right. That's really what we're trying to prevent.
yes, the yeast and molds basically are going to thrive in that range that we're talking about. So depending on the size of the bale, 16, 18%, 20% moisture all the way to 30 and higher. So really, basically, in under those situations, so the the cha- the approaches that we can take is either we apply a preservative, organic acid preservative, or we wrap that bale. So because otherwise that bale is going to spoil, right? And it's going to heat and it's going to even potentially burn. So and so far the figures I was showing you about dry matter losses, that's just dry matter losses, but we have to take in consideration that the dry matter that remains. So if you go back to that second slide, please, for a sec. Oh, the slide after that, that one.
The limitations of
Yes.
yeah.
No. The one that has the bell that says limitations of haymaking. So you'll see that. So the data that is more abundant is under matter losses, but we know that the dry matter that remains is going to now have more fiber, less sugars, so less soluble protein. So the digestibility of that fiber is going to be lower because the microbes are going to go first. They're going to degrade first the most nutritious fractions of the dried matter. So they're going to leave behind the trash,
Right.
what is like harder to digest, right?
Right.
And that's going to be basically the slowly digestible fiber fractions. So we are not only facing dry matter losses, but also what is left is going to have less nutritional value and is going to have molds.
Right.
And those molds can produce mycotoxins. So we can have issues of mycotoxins too, fumonisins, saralenon, DON. So, and that's going to affect the health of our animals. And depending on what animal we're going to be feeding, so in the case of horses are like way sensitive to moldy hay. You should never feed moldy hay to any animal, but especially to horses, right?
Yeah.
So they can experience allergies and respiratory issues when they are fed this type of moldy hay. So we never feed any moldy hay to any animal, but especially to horses.
Yep.
So going back to the first slide, so to complete the discussion that we have with Glenda, so it's important to recognize that as we dry the hay further to its ideal moisture, so 20, 18, 16, depending on the size of the bale, so we are going to increase the leaf losses. So this is discussion on the leaf losses is also very important because leaves are going to be the fraction of the forage that are going to contain the best nutrients, right? Especially for legumes.
Yeah, for the
and
protein.
legumes are going to be the ones experiencing more leaf shattering compared to grasses. So, and this is an issue certainly that we need to be careful with during the swat manipulation. So, for instance, we in this region of the U.S., we should have mower conditioners. So those mower conditioners are crucial for those basically short periods that we already know that we're going to have to shorten for a day or two that drying period by having a mower conditioner, right? So, but if we're going to be conditioning legumes, we need to select the right conditioner. So it has to be a roll conditioner. They're going to result in less leaf losses compared to flail conditioners, which those are going to be fine with grasses. So if you're only doing grasses, flail conditioners is going to be okay. But if you're doing legumes, then you need to consider having those roll conditioners. So are demonstrated to result in less leaf losses.
Yeah.
And then tedding for us in this region of the US, we need to ted. So, but when we're making hay, but if you are in the Western U.S., so there are some people there that will skip tedding, especially if it's under irrigation, they have no tedding there. So because of the leaf losses issues, right? So on there, if you have the funds, then you have inverters are going to be more gentle than tethers. So in the case of the of raking, so for instance, mergers are going to be more gentle too than rakers are going to result in less leaf losses. Uh, but the issue of leaf losses is much a bigger issue for the people that are under irrigated hay in the Western U.S. For those producers, this is the big problem. For
Yep.
us here in this rainy area of the U.S., the Eastern U.S., our main problem is typically our bales are getting moldy.
Yeah.
So yes. So on this graph is basically indicating you have these two opposing forces. So as you dry more, you're going to have more leaf losses. So, and now you have to worry about that. But if you don't dry all the way as you should, then during storage, you're going to have huge losses. You may even have your full all barn burnt.
Yeah.
So because of the heat that will be released during spoilage.
But for the
Yes.
most part, I would say that we see a mix, right? A lot of our pastures and fields here tend to be a mix of legumes and grasses. So there's kind of that good combination where they can still support some leaf loss at, drier conditions. But I wanted to just skip to the next slide on weather related factors because this kind of really indicates kind of what you were talking about, right? How do we prioritize when we're gonna kind of have that optimal hay making harvest time? And I think this sort of importance chart here kind of highlights that. So you obviously reference a source that if you
Yeah.
know you want to try for fresher drying, and you mentioned that a mower conditioner and then potentially tedding as well are ways to, if you have a mixed pasture with legumes, those will.
Have a wide swath too.
Yep.
So produce a wide swath when you're mowing, as you know, it has to be ideally at least 80%. So of the original area that is mowed should be covered, if possible higher, right? So there are some of the older equipment where this could be harder. So, but this is important, right? Having a
Yep.
wide swath. You mentioned having mixtures for grasses and legumes. So that's going to affect the swath structure and it's going to facilitate the drying of the legumes because legumes dry slower than grasses. So, and among legumes, for instance, there are even differences. Like red clover is the one that is known to be the slowest to dry. So, although Barenbrook released a new cultivar, Freedom, that doesn't have hairs, doesn't have the trichomes, and the stems are way thinner than the regular red clovers. And we had good experience making hay out of with that Freedom cultivar.
Yep.
So yes, I just want to comment that.
Yeah.
So there are cultivar factors, the species factors. As I mentioned, legumes dry slower than grasses. But when you have that grass legume combination, the the structure of the swath is going to allow more aeration when there is a mixture of grasses and legumes, and that's going to help the legumes to dry faster. So that's important. All of these are important factors. So tedding, so conditioning, having a wide swath, so also raking at the right moment. So it's going to be important, right? So, but weather is king in this case. For making hay, you must have good weather. You need to check the weather forecast. So we need to be looking for optimal solar radiation, for high ambient temperature, but especially we need to keep in consideration that if the relative humidity is going to be above 70%, it's going to be impossible for us to be able to dry our hay properly because there is a balance between the moisture in the air and the swath. And if the relative humidity is higher than 70, we are not going to be able to get to 20% dry matter 20% moisture for our small square bales, 18% for the round bales, and so on. So, so those are very crucial factors. An additional one that's important to mention is going to be the soil moisture. So the soil ideally needs to be dry, and this can be difficult in our region. So, and sometimes, basically, like we can have all these conditions above where it should be, but the soil still is wet because it just rained. So, and that's where, we usually can have issues. And that is why having these tools, conditioning, tedding, that can be helpful. So if we really need to make hay, so to expedite that drying, right? So also having that wind speed, moderate wind speed, is going to allow also for the removal of that moisture from the swath, and expediting the drying of the hay. Yes, those weather conditions are very important. We need to check. So whenever I do this, I want to make sure that I'm going to have at least 4 to 5 days of no rain in the forecast. So, and ideally, I want my soil to be uh, uh, dry at the beginning of that period, but that can be difficult,
Right.
right? So, and that's where having those preservatives can give us peace of mind, or or having a wrapper available, right, to wrap the bales. So in case the weather conditions are not suitable. So also it's important to recognize the effects of seasonality in a region, right? So for us, the first cut is basically impossible, almost impossible to make hay out of our first cut. So because it's too wet, too rainy. So, but the second and third cuts, especially the third cut, is very suitable for. It's less likely that you're going to have to face with unexpected rain for your third cut at the end of August, beginning of September.
Right.
So, so that's what I have seen my time here in Maine. What I talk with our producers, going to be the most kind of reliable period
Yeah.
that we can produce hay. And you see a lot of hay production around that time here in
Yep.
our state.
Yeah.
So,
So I think
yes.
a good recommendation from what you're mentioning is that folks maybe have a plan B if they're making hay in the earlier part of the season to go to baleage, right? Or
That will be my
haylage,
suggestion. If
right?
you if
Potentially
you don't, you're
prepare,
not forced to make hay because of a certain
right?
reason. So then your first cut should be baleage. That
Right.
will be the safest choice, right,
Right.
in our region.
Yeah. And
So
then second cut and third cut is less variable. You potentially have uh,
I am more likely to
a drier
have
soil, and you have a
yes.
bigger window of like where you might have 5 days
The
of.
weather is going to be more
Yeah.
suitable to make
Yeah.
hay for those second and third cuts.
Yeah.
So
That's a
yes.
good recommendation. I think folks can really
Yeah, I know the
utilize
first cut
that.
is the one that has the biggest yield, but because of that, the stems are thicker, so the swaths are going to be heavier. So it's going to be way harder to produce hay with that. You have to be extremely lucky to be able to do it. So I will default to like that's what we do. We prefer to do baleage for our first cut. So and we only do hay second and third whenever we are needing to do that for
Yeah.
our purposes. Yes.
So with that, I think we've kind of touched up on all of our points. If we could just quickly refresh and talk about the main takeaways from the presentation, and then if there are any questions, we'll take those here as well. So the main takeaways from the presentation today have been that really to maximize hay quality, we need to think about our weather, right? That's going to be the major factor, and maybe have a plan B of going to baleage if our moisture is nearing the 30%, right? If our dry matter is nearing the 30%.
So a baleage ideally should be somewhere between 45 to 55% dry matter. That's the ideal moisture for doing baleage. So when I was talking about the research at UNH that Dr. Brito is
Yep.
doing, along with the projects that we have for this alfalfa grant, so it was basically for those people that were planning to make hay,
Right.
but then suddenly, like, oh my God, I have this rain and I'm almost there. I am maybe 65, 70, 75% dry matter. So I'm almost there, but the rain is going to come,
Right.
and then it's better to wrap it. So if you wrap it, is there going to be a problem because there is almost going to be no fermentation or almost no fermentation? And what Dr. Brito has found so far is that is going to be fine. So, and Dr. Koblenz in Wisconsin also conducted another studies, which are the only two. There's only one published. There is the Koblenz one because that was done a few years ago. So where they have demonstrated that this is actually, something that is viable to
Right.
do. So even though there is not going to be fermentation, the losses are not going to be that significant. If you wrap it, you're still going to get a good bale as long as you put enough layers, right?
Yep.
So it's important to put 8 layers to that bale to make sure that is properly sealed.
Yep.
So, and there are no issues with its integrity.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then preservatives. That
Yes, preservatives for hay. If you go to the last slide, please, is it Sarah or
yeah, yep, Sarah's
the last slide of the presentation? So this is basically statistically, we collected dozens of published studies on hay microinoculants across the years from many countries, mostly in the US. So, and we found that basically there was no effect of hay microinoculants on dry matter losses in hay. I'm talking about hay, not silage here. Huh? And basically what I explained to you, that lactic acid bacteria, they those bacteria, they don't like when the dry matter is already 70%, so they will not be active, right? So, and especially like in the case of hay, you are not wrapping, you're not sealing. The hay is exposed to the air, right? So these bacteria cannot compete with the aerobic microbes because the lactic acid bacteria is anaerobic. So it's going to be preferred to have an anaerobic environment, and in hay it's not going to be possible, right? So basically, applying hay inoculants based on lactic acid bacteria, so it's going to be wasting money.
Yeah.
So basically, yes, at that level of dry matter is going to be the only possible solution is to use organic acid based preservatives. And I
Yeah.
mentioned that those buffer organic acids are going to be very good at doing that.
Yeah.
So without the issues of corrosiveness
Yep.
compared to plain propionic acid,
Yep.
right? So yes, and there are several commercial products available for that purpose. So to choose from,
Yep.
just having that at hand is going to be it can be a lifesaver rather than losing a whole harvest or having your barn burnt.
Yep.
Or your truck burnt.
Yeah, right.
While the
Of
bales
your
are being
equipment. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So we conducted actually a study using a database from the there is a agency, try to remember that monitors fires across the whole U.S. We selected the incidences caused by of hay being moved by trucks
Yep.
around the country,
And it's
and we
constantly-
found that those hay fires are actually have the highest incidence in the Massachusetts area, right, and also in the southeast, like Georgia, Florida. So those are hotspots
Right.
where road hate fires occur.
Right.
So yes, when corrected for the production of those states in terms of
Yeah,
hay, right? When
yeah.
you correct for that, those areas are hotspots for hay fires.
Yep.
So and it's because we have quite a bit of precipitations both in the northeast and the southeast. So we don't have too many periods without rain. So if the bales are moist and they're moved by trucks, then they can catch fire in the truck too. So
Yeah.
that's
Another way to
look at a
have
problem.
accidents. Yeah, and to have a
Yes.
problem.
Yes.
So I think we covered almost all of the takeaways that you mentioned to us here today, and you've given folks a lot of knowledge for them to think about as they start getting out and doing first cut here. I wanted to see if there were any questions from the audience. I can't see them, so I don't know if Sarah or if anybody wants to just unmute themselves and ask the question, that'd be great too. That awkward moment of silence where we sit and wait.
I'm not seeing anything in the chat, so, but I am watching it if anybody wants to put anything in there.
Yeah. And thank you everybody for joining us today. So that kind of wraps up our conversation. We'll hang out obviously and take questions as they come in, but we know folks are busy this time of the year, so we'll give you some time back. I know that Susan is putting in the chat our survey. If you've been enjoying these webinars, please let us know whether you are or not. If you have suggested topics, we're open to having those suggested topics too. We're obviously trying to bring topics that are useful to our farmers. But while we wait, just remember that next month we have our June Dairy Month webinar. That's going to be entailing talking about consumer trends and dairy checkoff in the Northeast. And we have some folks from the Dairy Management Inc. Coming to join us in next month's webinar on June 25th. And if there are no questions, then we will look forward to seeing you next month. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. Have a good one.